Rotarians and guests, welcome to the November 11th meeting of the Rotary Club of York. Our members are dedicated to service above self and Rotary's four-way test. Today is a very special day. It's our salute and appreciation to our veterans. And this morning, before our meeting began, we were honored to host the Central York Middle School Colonial Fife and Drum Corps. It was a very inspirational musical welcome for our special Veterans Day meeting. And I learned that our guest speaker, their daughter, who is in 8th grade, was part of the Corps. So also I learned that it will be their 50th anniversary next year, and very exciting that that legacy is just for the middle school grades 8 and 7 at Central. Our club really appreciates hosting our Students of the Month, and of late that's been virtual, so it was really nice to have the young folks join us, especially when it was their day off. So Dawn and Leanne, please share our appreciation to your daughter and the rest of her comrades for joining us on their day off. And special thank you to band director Rick Worley, who I understand has been a longtime supporter of the Corps, and that's amazing. And next year they're going to have a special celebration and invite fife and drum corps from all over the country. So look forward to hosting that in York. Our opening song and pledge will be led by Aaron Jacobs, and our invocation by Michael Reichman. Aaron.
Thank you, President Ann. And Rotarians at the club, we would ask for the safety of others that you opt to not sing along. That said, oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rotarians, please join me in a word of prayer. Rotary International was founded on the principle of service above self. What does that mean? Service to something greater than just your own personal needs. Service to something bigger than any single individual. Embedded in the heart of every veteran is a stern sense of belief and a stern sense of service to one's country, one's fellow citizen, and one's set of values. The armed forces has long since become political and a tool for a candidate's campaign in election season. And though we're now coming off the heels of our most recent election cycle, we often superimpose our political beliefs onto whatever military action may be taking place. However, when all is said and done, the battles, the victories, the defeats, the casualties, it all comes back to what lies in the heart of every soldier: belief. A belief in serving your country, fellow citizens, in the Constitution, and most importantly, a belief in service above self. For all this, we give thanks and praise. Amen.
Thank you, Aaron and Michael, and thank you to all those who provide their expertise and service to ensure that our club meetings perform without a hitch with this hybrid format. Some announcements for you today. The membership committee will meet today at 1:30 via Zoom. Our board of directors will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. via Zoom, and our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee will meet on Monday at 8 a.m. I think via Zoom. We can just leave that off. Everybody's assuming that. Our program committee will meet next Tuesday at 2 p.m. And please provide your suggestions for our upcoming programs to Program Committee Chair and past President Mike Summers. If you could have those to him by tomorrow. Okay, quick turnaround. Last week, District Governor John Anthony shared formation of a new passport club, and their charter night is Tuesday at 5:30. You're welcome to join. It's okay if it's not there, Ben. Not there? Okay. I'd like to give a special shout out, like you, Veterans Day has a special meaning for many families, and it does for ours. There's a special guest joining us today, and it is my Uncle Bob Ruby. This is probably his first Rotary meeting, and he just turned 90 years old in September. So happy birthday, Uncle Bob. He was in the 82nd Airborne in 1955. He was at Nevada during the atomic test grounds where he witnessed the atomic bomb explosion. That's Uncle Bob on the right. He was in the Korean War and stationed in Korea as a first lieutenant in 1956. His father, my grandfather, Bud Ruby, served in the Navy during World War II and the Korean War. Uncle Bob was in the Army Reserves from 61 to 71 in the 8830th. I should have asked about that. Military Police Battalion. Happy Veterans Day, Uncle Bob. I'd also like to wish Veterans Day is special to us because our one and only was born on Veterans Day. So Shannon Ruby Druck is on the left. So I'd like to wish happy quarter century to our daughter, Shannon. And now for an uplifting moment, we get to induct our new members. I would like to invite our new member, past President Josh George, to the podium.
Thank you, President Ann. It's a pleasure to be back at the podium here at the Country Club of York. Last time I was at the podium here was March, and all of a sudden the world has changed. One of the really great things about inducting new members is that we are getting a new member. And as you know, that has been few and far between over the last few months. I do want to give a special shout out to JT Hand, who is the proposer for today's member, Ron Bunce, because JT is the only member in the COVID era who has proposed new members who have actually joined the club. So JT, good work. Keep it up. Ron, would you and JT please come up here so that we can recognize you? Our new member today is Ron Bunce. Ron is the executive president and CEO of the Children's Home of York. He's been in that role since March 3rd. So think about the transition and the interesting scenarios that Ron has had to deal with. We were joking at the table that both Ron and JT took on their new roles within 2 days of each other in early March, and they must be trading a lot of stories about how to deal with COVID situations and their businesses respectively. So they've been great pals here through this time period. Ron's originally from upstate New York and is currently living in Baltimore, but he's working here at the Children's Home of York. Ron's interests include running, which is great because I'm also a runner. We need to find a time to go out and put a couple miles on. He also is big into cycling. So if any of you are cyclists, maybe you can connect with Ron and find a time to go out and bike ride. It's one of the safe activities here in the COVID era. And he also enjoys gardening. Ron is the father of 2 adult children, Audrey, who's 24, and Anna, who's 22. Members, would you please help me welcome Ron Bunce as a member of the Rotary Club of York. President Ann.
Thank you, past President Josh. Thank you, JT, and for all the membership committee efforts for your efforts during this challenging time. And just as a reminder to all of our club members, it's a great time to send your suggestions our way because people, I think, are even more appreciative of the opportunity to connect and hear great speakers that we have lined up for our club. So keep the membership committee in mind. And next we have a business spotlight. This is Feuder Brothers Jewelers. Feuder Brothers was a downtown icon for 7 decades. In 2006, they moved to their Whiteford Road location across from the Galleria Mall. They're celebrating 88 years in business, which is owned and operated by 3rd generation family members. Rotarian Just Eichenrau is the 2nd generation, and his daughter, Rotarian Debbie Ashway, is the 3rd generation to carry on the family business. Feuder Brothers Jewelers closed for 2 months during the COVID crisis from the end of March, and then they opened the first Tuesday after Memorial Day. There was 0 income during that time frame, and all employees were on unemployment. It was an unknown and scary time for all moving forward, and Feuder Brothers, as many of us, didn't know what to expect. As a brick and mortar store, Feuder Brothers, with its small staff, follows the guidelines of wearing masks, and they have plexiglass station for repair take-in, and they constantly sanitize their space and their jewelry. Appointments, curbside delivery, and virtual shopping are available, but most customers come in the store and it is business as usual. Since Zoom is the in thing, Feuder Brothers tried a virtual gemstone party on Zoom as opposed to their regular in-store party, and it was a very successful event, as Debbie shared. Business has been very busy at Feuder Brothers since they were allowed to reopen. Customers specifically say they want to support their local independent store, and Feuder Brothers is extremely grateful for the support of their community. Next up is our salute to veterans. JT Hand will be back to the podium, and now we have a video to share with you. Thank you.
There is a call. Some hear it like a distant thunder. Some hear it like a whisper in the ear. Some just feel it in their hearts. A deep sense of responsibility to country, to service, to something bigger than themselves. We honor those who are willing to do what so few have done because of their sacrifice and service. Our country is a light on the hill that cannot be put out. Though many have tried, those who stand and protect it are heroes, worthy of our respect and admiration, worthy of every minute of attention we give to pause and recognize the hope, the sacrifice, the honor of all who have served our country.
Rotarians, the service songs, accompanied by Rotarian Chunk Long. First and foremost, the oldest, most decorated branch of service in our nation's history, the United States Army. The United States Marine Corps. The United States Navy. The United States Air Force. the United States Coast Guard. And the United States Merchant Marines. Fellow Rotarians, a loud and thunderous hooah to all of our veterans.
Thank you, JT and Chuck, for that inspiring introduction of our veterans. I know that we had several veterans tuning in virtually today, so thank you. We thank you all for your service. And now to introduce our program is Brad Jacobs. Brad.
Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. I wish to thank President Ann and Program Chair Mike for inviting me today to share in today's Veterans Program. It is indeed an honor and privilege to introduce my friend and one of our own New York County residents as our Veterans Day speaker. Veterans Affairs Secretary Robert Wilkie stated today, and I quote, "I encourage everyone to use this Veterans Day as a chance to learn about the 41 million men and women who have worn the uniform of the United States. Today, we will hear from one of those 41 million. Lieutenant Colonel Don O'Shell has represented the Commonwealth and our country as a servant leader and as a true American patriot. Our friendship, our service paths and experiences have crossed over the past 25 years, both serving in the Ridge administration as Ridgies and as row officers in the York County government, and we both received commissions in the Pennsylvania National Guard. Lieutenant Colonel O'Shell is director of the Staff Headquarters Pennsylvania Air National Guard. In that role, he serves as a principal advisor to the Pennsylvania Deputy Adjutant General Air regarding federal and domestic operation programs and policies affecting over 4,100 assigned personnel serving in 3 wings and in 6 installations across the Commonwealth. In 2016, he deployed to Afghanistan as an advisor to the Afghan Air Force. In 2020, he again deployed a second time to Afghanistan as the director of the Joint Visitors Bureau with headquarters Resolute Support. We will learn more about those deployments with his presentation today. Lieutenant Colonel O'Shell graduated from York College of Pennsylvania with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, Public Administration, and earned a master's degree from Public Administration from the Penn State University, Middletown, Pennsylvania. He has also completed courses through the Air Command Staff College and the Air War College. Some of his major awards and decorations are the Joint Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster, Air Force Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, and the Air Force Achievement Medal. He was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel in September of 2015. He resides in Springersbury Township with his wife Leanne and Lucy, who is a member of the Central Middle School Fife and Drum Corps that greeted us today here at the Country Club. Lieutenant Colonel O'Shell returned home from Afghanistan August 10th, 2020. So let us give him another welcome home reception from York Rotary as he shares his experiences in Afghanistan. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Don O'Shell.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Brad, for the kind introduction. And thank you to the club, President Ann and Mike Summers for coordinating this opportunity. Appreciate being here. And Brad kind of gave the preview of the first part of my slide deck, which I needed to, I felt inform folks that there is an Air National Guard component. A lot of times when you talk about being in the Air National Guard, people translate it to International Guard, and I'm like, no, it's Air, Space, National Guard. And it's one of the three components of the United States Air Force: the active duty Air Force, the regular Air Force, the Air Force Reserve, and of course, Air National Guard. And here, one of our slides that we use in our Pennsylvania National Guard 101 brief, you have the Army on the one side, the left side, the Air Force on the right side, and you see roughly how the Guard makes up each of those branches. 100,000 plus are in the Air Guard in the United States Air Force. And this is how we look in Pennsylvania. So the Army is the big entity that we all have to work around and work with. And then we're much smaller at around 4,000 personnel. So we're the 4th largest Air Guard in the country, and we have roughly 1,300 plus full-time personnel, which is what I am currently. But most of my career, I was what they call a drilling status guardsman. 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, plus deployments, plus training. But most of our folks are part-time. And as Brad said, we have 3 flying wings, 2 manned. We have a KC-146 unit out in Pittsburgh, C-130 unit here in Harrisburg, and an RPA, or remotely piloted aircraft unit, in Willow Grove. And our 6 locations. And a variety of support units that do a myriad of different missions. A lot of great stuff comes out of the Air Guard. We support 3 major combat commands, so we're very, very much tasked. And then our deployment numbers. Now, we don't have 17,000 people. That means a lot of us have deployed multiple times. I've done it twice, so I'm 2 of those 17,687 deployments. And that's as of mid-year. We're getting our end-of-year fiscal year numbers here added up, but as of July, that's where we stood. All right, so now to the more personal aspect of this. So this is my view getting ready to leave out of Newark. Not Newark. Norfolk, I'll get my ends right. Naval Base down in Virginia, never been there before in my life. And that's where they had us kind of rally up and get ready to take the contractor aircraft over to Qatar. Typically, you don't fly military aircraft out of the United States to go deploy. You fly contract aircraft, and Atlas is one of the big contract airs. Our first stop was in Germany. No, this is not a concentration camp. This is part of the Frankfurt Airport, which was originally an active duty base back in the day. It was decommissioned at the end of the Cold War, but the facilities are still there, and that's where they kind of had us gather while we were waiting for the aircraft to be refueled and for the crew to get their crew rest. And then your first stop, unlike our European partners, they directly deploy. They go from Europe, wherever they're at, directly into theater. We have to go through Qatar on the Air Force side. The Army primarily goes through Kuwait. And so this is the IUD Air Base in Qatar, and this is before it gets gruelingly hot in the morning. And I mentioned hot. I love seeing the York air conditioning units there and in Afghanistan. York International is all over the world. I guess now it's Johnson Controls, but it's always good to see their products that kept us from really roasting. And this is the first stay here. I had never been in open bay barracks like this. My first experience going over was in the middle of the night, and I was with a bunch of Marines, and they had no care for rank whatsoever, and the only available bunk was a top bunk, and that's what I took. So this is my last go around, and I was the only guy in there. It was very odd, very eerie. So to be the only person in a 64 bed facility at night. I was originally, as Brad said, located at, for my first deployment at Kaya, which is the Hamid Karzai International Airport. And I worked with the Afghan Air Force, and we were called TAC Air, Train, Advise, Assist, Command Air. And we advised the Afghan Air Force in terms of their 7,000 personnel, utilization of aircraft, utilization of airmen, and that was what our focus was. And these are just some shots from the base there. It's all situated in mountains. Kabul is actually very climatic. It's about the same altitude as Colorado Springs, so it doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold, so it's pretty decent weather. The south of the country in Kandahar, it gets much hotter and much colder. And this is my other location. The building on the left is what we call the yellow building. That's headquarters, Resolute Support headquarters. And it was originally, back in the day, an old Russian social club or officers club. And it's interesting to see how the Russians constructed things. The most interesting aspect of that building was the staircase. The stairs were uneven. And so you always felt like a little tipsy going up and down those stairs. And I heard that Nancy Pelosi, who had visited at one point, didn't fare too well on those stairs either. And she came in heels. They warned her, do not wear heels. But yet she insisted on having the look. And so she had to navigate those stairs, which was pretty scary. Then on the right is the memorial we have for the airmen and soldiers and Marines, et cetera, who have given their ultimate sacrifice in Afghanistan from all the coalition partners to include the United States. And we didn't think we were having anything, and because the COVID had hit, and we thought, okay, social distancing, there's nothing going to happen. And I got word the day before that our commander, General Scott Miller, was expecting us, regardless, to have a Memorial Day celebration. We better get the wreath. And I'm like, well, who gets the wreath? Where's the wreath come from? So luckily, our comptroller had a good connection on the outside with the Afghans, and they put that together in less than 24 hours. So they did a fabulous job for us, and that was what we managed to get last minute. The offices I worked in, you can see them in the back. You see that Czech soldier standing there. Right above him, those windows on the right is where we were located. The reason I went to Afghanistan the first time was really quite a very sad one. I replaced Major Phyllis Pelkey, who was an advisor to the Afghan Air Force like I was. She was killed in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan, along with Sergeant Koos, who's pictured there. So that was what took me to Afghanistan the first go around. And you see her advising some of the Afghan women in that one picture up there. And these are the folks we advised. On the left of the picture in civilian clothes is our interpreter, Hussein John, and then of course me, and then Colonel Muhammad, popular name in Afghanistan. He was the Afghan Air Force personnel commander, and we advised him on personnel matters. And then my boss, Lieutenant Colonel Paula Kelly. So one of the side duties that I did when I was in Afghanistan the first time was Guardian Angel. And this is down in Kandahar, which I didn't realize it was that dramatically different. We went from being roughly 70-ish degrees in Kabul, and we flew to the south of the country, and it's like you walk out and it's like an oven. I was amazed by the difference. And so this is the flight line. It was pretty deserted then. It was still fairly deserted now. Back during the surge, when we had 100,000 plus soldiers, airmen, et cetera there, this place was very, very busy. And then on the left was what the folks that we took down to Kandahar. And then on the right is what they fed us on the flight line, literally put it on the flight line, and that's what we had for lunch. On the way back, it was much more somber as well. They loaded a bunch of, they were just simply plywood boxes of Afghan soldiers who had been killed in action. And so we had that as our quote unquote cargo to return with. And to me, it's amazing how many young Afghans die in that war. 3,000 to 5,000 earlier this year when I was there had died just this calendar year. So it's amazing how many give their lives in that conflict. And then this was my second go around. I'm pictured here with General Frank McKenzie. I'm on the left, and Lieutenant Ray, one of my staff, is on the right. General McKenzie is the CENTCOM commander, and this was back in February before COVID hit. So we're doing the rounds through camp. In the background, you can see the U.S. Embassy complex, the more modern looking building. And we did not see him again until July. And he basically said, I'm coming back, because he was done not making his rotations through the theater, and said, okay, whether you're ready for me or not, I'm coming, so make sure you have the right protocols in place. But that was the last time we saw him. And this was my reduced staff. Like everything else, COVID impacted us, and being Joint Visitors Bureau, when the SecDef puts out a stop movement order and no one can come to theater, that pretty much kills off your business. NATO followed suit, and they also did the same thing with our European partners. So we really had no visitors for a period of about 4 months. So pictured here is Sergeant Miller, myself, Renee, who was a Department of the Air Force civilian, Lieutenant Ray, who's now stationed in Boston, and then Captain Banyan, who was from Romania, and then Serter, who's a Turkish retired Army aviation management guy, and he's now working full-time for NATO at Resolute Support. This is the full team before COVID hit. So Petra Furtick right next to me there on the left. And then we had 2 Czech soldiers, which we sent home once we realized we didn't really have a whole lot of work to do. And so we had to downsize our operation. And Petra went home as well because she had a high risk condition. And so she felt it was safer for her to depart. And then she, to my knowledge, still hasn't come back because they just won't allow anybody in with high risk conditions back into theater. And she's Croatian, and her original claim to fame was she used to work for the Croatian president. And that's how she got her protocol experience working for him. Living conditions looks very similar. On the left was our facilities at HKIA, and then on the right was at Resolute Support. And basically, our buildings aren't real buildings. They're a bunch of connexes or boxes, shipping containers that are assembled together to resemble a building. And so that's nothing more than a shipping container on both sides. These are general officer quarters. Being Joint Visitor Bureau, you have friends and connections. And so as I was returning home, I had to spend about a week at Bagram Airfield. And so they put me up in the DVQ, the Distinguished Visitors Quarters, at Bagram for my stay there. I will say, while we were not hosting visitors, our DVQs at Camp Resolute Support became quarantine and isolation. So if you tested positive for COVID or you had close contacts with someone who did, we would put you up into our facility to maintain basically communications, because we had certain folks who are considered mission essential. And so to have connectivity via computers, the NATO system, the secret system, and the US UNCLAS system, they stayed with us. And so rooms very similar to this was where we hosted those that had to have some downtime due to COVID. And then the ride, you can go nowhere by ground unless the visibility isn't good, and you have to do ground travel, which is very, very rare. Just prior to, again, COVID kicking off, we had a very busy week at the end of February where we had Secretary of Defense come in, Esper, to kind of celebrate the Afghan-Taliban peace agreement that was signed in Doha. We had a similar event in Kabul at the Presidential Palace. And then we had also the Secretary General of NATO come in, Jens Stoltenberg, and his aircraft wasn't able to land at Camp RS, and so they had to go get him by ground route. So, but it's very rare. That was the only time that it happened that I was aware of when I was there for 7 months. So I just needed to go over to HKIA to visit with my troop over there, and this is the ride I took. And I say this is the same flight path that Major Pelkey and Sergeant Coos took, because again, you couldn't travel by vehicle. And what happened with their situation was the area where we landed at Camp RS is a soccer field, and there were kids playing on the soccer field. And so it was in a British aircraft, British Puma. And so the RAF pilot said, okay, we got to circle around. And he didn't realize that there was an observation balloon that was directly over the HLZ, and they got tangled up in that, and that's what brought their aircraft down. So that's how she passed away from her deployment. So it's always it always unnerved me a bit when I took that ride, because I knew what had happened with her. So you make good friends while you're deployed. Folks on the left, again, my staff, I had turned 50 years old in Afghanistan. That's a great place to have a 50th birthday party. So yes, that was all that stuff. Friends from York sent the party favors and the snacks, etc. And then on the right, Major Furman, she was from the 193rd Special Ops Wing, which is where I'm out of. And so she also deployed to Afghanistan. She was located at Bagram, and I was over at RS. And this is another friend I made while I was there, Major Darius Germanis. Major Germanis is in the Lithuanian Army. And Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania National Guard has a state partnership program, as does every National Guard state in the Union with various countries. And so ours is Lithuania. And so we got to know each other because of that premise. He worked, ironically, in the Director of Staff office, and I'm a Director of Staff here in Pennsylvania. So we had that connection as well. And hopefully I'll see him come April. We're supposed to be visiting Lithuania again, and hopefully we can reconnect. Again, friends from the HKIA deployment of my first rotation there. This is our CJ1 or Coalition Joint personnel folks. And then hurry up and wait. do a lot of that in the military, and this is the PAX terminals. The one on the top is the Bagram PAX terminal. Yes, those fancy Air Force chairs, they aren't as comfortable as they look. And then the one on the right is the Cutter. That's the kind of the final stop before you head out. And ironically, it's, you know, a big Air Force and a big world, but then it's also a small Air Force. I traveled back the first leg out of Afghanistan. Again, it's on military aircraft. You don't do commercial in and out of Afghanistan on a C-5, and all these folks with me are 193rd people out of Harrisburg. It just happened that way that I ended up with my own unit heading out. So this is all their equipment. They were deployed there with one of our aircraft. And then on the left was what I thought would be my last view of Afghanistan ever. For my first deployment, I thought I'd never, ever go back there, and never say never. So I'm not saying never again, because you never know. Afghanistan might have one more shot at me. And then the ride home on the right, again, contract air. And what makes all this possible is the support you get back home, from home. And as Brad said, I was a row officer, clerk of courts, and this is the management team at the time while I was deployed. And the staff, they sent all this bed sheets basically with all these messages on them. And of course, family. From the first deployment, Lucy, and then Kaylee on the right. And the family. And I'm dressed in civilian clothes because I came back on commercial airline that particular rotation. When you were deployed at TAC Air, our commander required us to go through the deployment transition center at Ramstein Air Force Base. And so from there, we took commercial. And so I was on Lufthansa, and that's why I was in civilian clothes here at Newark Airport. And then this last time I was in uniform with contract air from Qatar to BWI. So I had no commercial airlines in between, and this is what was greeting me in the front lawn when I got home. Granddaughter at the front there, Lila. And then my amazing spouse who basically takes the brunt of the deployments. Now the first deployment was lots of snow back in 2016. There's tons of snow that year. So she got very proficient at running the snowblower and digging herself out snowstorm after snowstorm. So I assumed this past winter was going to be very bad. I told people that. I'm like, if it's going to snow a lot, it's blame me, because when I deploy, it snows a lot. What thankfully didn't, but she still had a lot on her plate, to include replacing washers and dryers and all kinds of other odds and ends. It always seemingly happens when you're deployed. These things always break down when you're not around. And so thanks to her support and connection and love over the course of those many months, made it all possible. And being a Marine, she knows it, she understands it, she gets it, and I really do value and appreciate that. So happy Veterans Day. And red. I had no idea what red meant. I saw one of our sergeants, he was wearing civilian clothes at RS. We were allowed to wear civilian clothes in rare circumstances. And she had this t-shirt that said red. I'm like, what is red? Remember everybody deployed. That's what it means. So red. On Veterans Day, remember everyone deployed. So that's all I have. Questions? Yes, sir. Correct.
In the areas where you were north and then farther south, what is the physical danger of RPGs and the Taliban, so forth, taking sniper shots at U.S. aircraft?
Well, I don't think our aircraft were really particularly vulnerable from my understanding, because that was, oh, sure, I'm sorry. I'm being asked about whether or not our aircraft were vulnerable to RPG. And I'm a personnel by background, so I'm not a munition specialist, and I don't really know a whole great deal about that. My perception was our aircraft were pretty impervious due to the air defenses we had. It was more the concern, again, ground transportation, which did occur in theater, just not so much with us, but with other portions of the formation. The one area that seemingly always got hammered was Bagram. It's like a big magnet. Right before I got there, they had a ground assault by the Taliban. They had breached the one wall and were trying to get their way into the installation, but they were repelled. But really, Bagram seemed to be, again, the magnet, whereas we at RS, or those of us that are over at HKI at the airport, seemingly fared better. Now, with the signing of the Taliban peace agreement, the Taliban pretty much left us alone. US and coalition, they left alone. They still went after the Afghans, who we then supported the Afghans in terms of air support, but they left pretty much the coalition and US forces alone. Other questions?
I have a question for you, Don. What was the level of personal safety in Afghanistan when you were there?
Again, I felt very comfortable. The issue always was that people in my role was insider threats, insider attacks. So as an air advisor, I dealt a lot more with the Afghans than I did in my role most recently, where I was mostly at headquarters. And so every time you met with the Afghans, you had to wear your full battle rattle, your flak vest, and have your M4 and your M9 all ready to go in case something went down, because that's where we had casualties. And so that was the scarier part of it. I had one episode, and luckily we didn't react to it in a way that we could have. We were at the Afghan headquarters. I was meeting with Colonel Mohammed, and he was the officer of the day. And he was sitting there at the front desk, and I didn't realize they had a policy that all Afghan airmen had to surrender their weapons upon entering that building, because again, it's an insider threat for them as well. And so this airman came right up to me, right next to me, and cleared his weapon. And it seemed to me like he was charging his weapon. And I looked over at my guardian angel. I'm like, are you seeing this? And he's like this. And then we realized he was simply clearing his weapon to turn it into Colonel Mohammed. So that was always kind of the scary thing, was when in your close proximity, who's friend, who's foe, because you really didn't know. One day they're okay with you, the next day, not so much. Yes, sir. The Navy has all the questions.
To your knowledge, what is the present, troop deployment U.S. forces in Afghanistan now?
When I arrived, it was a little over 10,000, and that's always kind of the undisclosed story. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting to do that. Sorry, Ann. The number of U.S. personnel or coalition personnel in Afghanistan. Kind of the unknown to most people on the outside is, yes, there's a number of uniformed personnel. There's a little over 10,000 when I first arrived. But what's really unknown is the 40,000-ish contractors that are there. So there is a huge footprint from the United States as well as all over Europe with contractor personnel present in theater. As the Taliban peace agreement was signed off on, we then reduced down to 8,400. And then last I've been seeing and hearing, it's roughly getting to about 4,000 uniformed personnel. But no one, again, the media does never addresses the number of contract personnel. And that's really the bulk of the force we have currently there. Yes, sir.
When you say contract personnel, are they contract soldiers, or are they doing things like building and all that?
Well, they're civilians. I'm sorry, are they contract soldiers or are they otherwise? The contractors are civilians, and a lot of them are like either construction, aircraft maintenance, other system maintenance, IT. There's a lot of whatever you envision contractors doing. They're there to provide all kinds of ancillary support. They're not doing any of the war fighting. And that's all on the coalition personnel and on the Afghan army. It's simply the support elements that they provide. No, not that I'm aware of. No mercenaries, no, that I ever encountered.
Don, another question from our virtual audience. The peace deal, do you think it will stick? Do you think there will be peace?
Well, I was reading that because I was wondering if I get any questions along those lines. I was reading up on it this morning. We again, the Taliban and the United States came to this agreement back in February that we wouldn't attack each other. And to a large degree, the Taliban and the US have abided by that, with the exception of when they go after the Afghans, we provide close air support. In terms of moving forward from that piece of it, apparently right now the Afghan government and the Taliban are stuck on procedural matters. They can't get past just the protocols of getting the negotiations set up there in Doha. And so I think a lot of it was waiting to see what happened with the presidential election. My perception is the Afghan government was kind of more predisposed to Joe Biden winning because they felt he'd be a stronger opponent of the Taliban, because they thought Trump had really pushed them hard to achieve a peace agreement or a settlement with the Taliban, more so than they were comfortable with. But Biden, when he was in the Obama administration, he was not an advocate for a big force structure there. He's basically looking at the same numbers of American personnel on the ground as what President Trump was towards the end here. So I don't know how much solace that really gives them, that there may be a new president. So it remains to be seen until Joe Biden takes the White House, if he ultimately does, and then how that impacts the negotiations in Doha. Yes, sir.
Can you speak, either on the record or off the record, of your understanding of our relationship in Qatar with respect to all of the forces in the Middle East? It's a very mysterious place.
Well, I didn't see very much of it, and they allow us to be there. That's about, I'm sorry, the relationship the United States has and NATO has with Qatar and our facility there. I didn't see very much of it. I just was basically on base there, IUD'd. It is a growing facility. There are dormitories and other buildings going up left and right. So it appears that the United States intends to have a long-term presence in Qatar. How they get along with the Saudis remains to be an open question, but yet we're allies with Saudi Arabia. So it is a unique relationship in terms of. No, I was not. Others that were, we had members of the 193rd that were deployed there, and before COVID happened, they were allowed to go downtown and mingle in the population, but because I was transiting, I was not allowed. Correct, yes, sir. But I was only visiting, thankfully. I'm not a big fan of that. It's too hot. All right. Anything else, or am I good to go for the day? Again, happy Veterans Day. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today, Don. We appreciate your service. And as you indicated, the service of your family as you were gone serving your country. Thank you to all our veterans and all the families, friends, and loved ones who supported their journey in support of our country. So in honor of your visit with us today, Don, we thank you for signing the book plate. And that book is An Elephant and Piggy Biggy by Mo Willems, which will be presented to the Crispus Attucks Daycare and Early Learning Center in your honor. Thank you. Hope you all have a safe week and join us next week, as our speaker will be Leanne Clayberger from the Pennsylvania Economy League. And our closing song is America the Beautiful by Ray Charles. Have a great week. Thank you.